Hi everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. Wonderful. We'll get going. Nice to see you. Not that I can see you all again this week. I hope that you really got some interesting take home from last week on nutrition, despite a few of the technical hiccups. This week we're really going to talk about lifestyle and its impact on mental health and well-being. It probably won't take quite an hour this evening. And just to let you know a couple of things that the chat box, unfortunately, well, I've got the screen sharing. I can't see the chat box, but I will have a look towards the end. And so if you've got any questions, feel free to put them into the chat box, which should be underneath on the bottom of the screen. You should be able to see a little chat. And we will hopefully have some time for some questions and answers at the end. I'm just checking because for some reason my video is not coming up, but apparently you can hear me all good. So this week is, really looking at mental health and what lifestyle things that you can implement. So it's about bringing a few more tools into your toolbox. And actually I was really keen to hear a couple of people have already messaged me to say that they've changed some things about their dietary intake from last week, and I've also heard from someone that said that they have had a history of depression, are on antidepressants, and have started to bring in extra vitamins and minerals, such as the ones that I talked about, vitamin B6, looking at fish oils, and they've noticed actually quite a change in their mood and have actually started reducing their antidepressants. So that's really exciting, and I think this is what I really want to do. I want people to have empowerment to actually have tools that they can bring in to really support their health and well-being and not just be reliant on medication. There's loads that we can do. So that's my aim here for this course. So, and excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold, so I might have to blow my nose every now and then. I know that's not very good form from a health practitioner, but it is what it is, unfortunately. So we're going to look at a little bit about how modern life contributes to mental ill health. We're going to look at sleep because it's incredibly important for mental health and well-being. We're going to look a little bit about exercise and how that affects mental health. And we're going to have a look at the New Zealand Mental Health Foundation's 5 ways of well-being and a little bit more. Just make sure if you can to switch your video off. Also in the left-hand side of your little corner, you might see it turns the video off. It should just turn your video off, not the entire screen off. So just check that if you like as well. So these are some ideas about how modern life contributes to our ill health. I should put health in, but actually it's more often ill health. A lot of it, so all sorts of different things. Perceived stress. So I'm talking about stress as we currently think about it in our modern day lifestyle. So obviously, many generations ago, the main cause of stress is usually acute. And we've all heard about the story of the saber-toothed tiger, or needing to run or move in a hurry and having a real stress response in your body. Nowadays, our modern stresses are often more in our head, or perceived stress, being stuck in traffic, being late for work. These sorts of stresses can also invoke the same response, getting our body ready for fight or flight. But of course, we're not going to fight or run away, but they release the same sort of hormones in our system. And this can be problematic when it's very chronic and long-term. Our long work hours, eating on the run and being time poor, often making poor choices around food as well, which I'll talk about a little bit, again, just on here. Mold and other toxins in our homes, there's quite a lot of evidence about things like fire retardants in our homes and other plastics that we use that can cause hormone disruption. Poor food choices, as I said before, but also food that's very low in nutrients. So you can go to the supermarket and buy, good, what you think are hopefully good quality fruit and vegetables, but we don't actually know how long they've been sitting on the shelf, and you don't know what sort of nutrient content they've still got left in them. So that can also be a problem. It's not like we go out to the garden, for most of us anyway, and grab our dinner. Environmental and other pollutants. This is also about pollutants, toxins otherwise, in our makeup, herbicides and pesticides that we're exposed to, and things like diesel fumes, petrol, paints, you name it. Screen time. So this is a bit of a strange one. There was a study done, and they wanted to look at obesity in children, and instead of looking at how much trying to record how fit or how much exercise they were doing, they actually looked at their screen time, and screen time predicted rates of obesity. So obviously it wasn't the screen making them fat, but they were suggesting that these children had much more sitting down time. So, and we generally in our modern day lives have a lot more sitting down time. So we spend a lot more time on the computers. For some of us, it's a full-time job to sit on the computers, and also, sorry, I've just had a few noise interruptions, a very sedentary lifestyle, so sitting behind a desk all day. Constant noise, so there is some evidence, some research around that in houses where there is constant noise from either road traffic or airports, apparently they've done some studies that suggest that the children that grow up in those households, due to the constant noise, actually have lower IQ, which is unfortunate. There's a lot of controversy at the moment about 5G. I don't know enough about it. I haven't done any research, but there's certainly enough controversy to suggest that that's not good for us. And there's also a lot of talk about Wi-Fi in itself. Lack of sleep, shift work, having light at night time. So I know for myself, when I first moved into the city, I really struggled with light at night and noise at night, and I did not sleep for quite a few weeks. It took me quite a while to get used to all that after living in the country. Social media, lots of research around how that can be, that can negatively impact on people. Isolation, lack of community. We don't have the same sort of, we often don't, some people do, but we often don't have the same sort of neighbourhood community that we're used to. Alcohol, drugs, smoking, medications, and mobile phone use. So I did actually find some studies that said that people that used mobile phones a lot actually increased their cortisol levels, so cortisol being a stress hormone. So I thought that that was quite interesting. This is just a graph sort of highlighting that. It's a UK graph. They talked about the burden of disease. What they didn't actually put on the graph, but they did talk about underneath, was that loneliness. And there are studies that show that loneliness or isolation is actually the biggest predictor of morbidity and mortality. Interesting. But all the other things, there's all sorts of things, smoking, physical inactivity, alcohol use. A diet low in fruits I thought was really interesting, because a diet low in vegetables is quite a bit down the bottom, so obviously that's very important. And diet low in nuts and seeds. So, yep, great, thank you. Processed meat, we know that that's not very good for us. Diet low in seafood, omega-3. So this is just reiterating some of the mostly modern day ills that contribute to our illness. These are some other random facts that I found on the research. So several studies have shown that depressed mood is substantially alleviated within a very short time of abstaining from alcohol. Interestingly, I had a client today, and it wasn't her drinking the alcohol, but it was a friend of hers who apparently drinks up to a bottle a night with her partner every night, and then actually a lot more when she goes out. And she's got some health problems and some mood problems. And she's done everything. She's changed her diet, she's started exercise, she's done all these things, but she refuses to drop the alcohol. And her friend said it's so interesting because some of the problems have gone, but some of them, she's sure, is just related to ongoing alcohol use, unfortunately. Smoking cigarettes also, there's research to suggest that you have an increased chance of mood issues or anxiety issues. And the researchers did talk about the dopamine influence. So we talked about dopamine last week, one of the neurotransmitters, and its relationship to sort of addictive behaviours. And they suggested that the smoker is constantly having a satisfaction of an addiction, obviously, when they smoke, and then the withdrawal, really, of the addiction in between the cigarettes. And they wondered whether that had a contribution to their mental health and well-being, and also inflammation, obviously, because cigarette smoking isn't particularly good for you. And we know that inflammation is associated with depression, because we learned that last week. While evidence supports, this is both good and bad news for coffee drinkers, evidence supports that avoidance of caffeine and anxiety disorders is the best way to go. It also suggests that caffeine use may be predictive against depression. So for those people with low mood, apparently coffee is okay. If you suffer from anxiety, the research suggests that it's not okay. There was also a systematic review found listening to music over a period of time can help reduce depressive symptoms in adults, and laughter has been found to reduce stress hormones and release dopamine and endorphins. Of course, we know that laughter makes us feel a lot better, but there we go, there's a bit of research behind it. So the first thing that I'm going to look at tonight is about sleep. Sleep is associated with mental illness, Alzheimer's, poor sleep, Alzheimer's disease, obesity. It basically impacts every area of our health. So poor sleep is highly correlated with mental illness and often precedes a mental illness. So I'll show you a study that has looked at that particularly. And treatment of insomnia itself can actually help reduce the symptoms of depression. So if you are depressed and you manage to treat your insomnia with sleeping tablets or any other means, your depressive symptoms ideally will be less. So that's, it sounds quite obvious, but it does make you wonder how much the lack of sleep actually is contributing to the depressed mood. A variety of hormones, including melatonin, cortisol, thyroid hormone. Thyroid is the very important hormone which governs an awful lot of your body's metabolism. And so when you have a low thyroid, you're often depressed. You might oversleep. People often get constipated, put on weight. A hyperthyroid, a thyroid that's working too fast, you may get anxious and suffer from poor sleep. So this study suggests that the sleep-wake cycle governs a lot of this hormone as well. Melatonin is it's the hormone, I think I discussed a little bit last week as well. It's the one that really is the one that helps you sleep at night. So obviously all regulated by the sleep-wake cycle. Melatonin is also involved in inflammation and cardiovascular disease as well. So low or poor melatonin patterns have been associated with other forms of disease. So once again, sleep. This is really interesting. You would have all had this if you've gone out for a big night and you've had for some reason you've had a very poor sleep. And the next day you not only feel tired, but you absolutely crave carbohydrates or sugar. There's a scientific reason behind that. Poor sleep leads to our bodies making more of a hormone called ghrelin, and ghrelin stimulates the appetite. So, you can totally understand poor sleep will generally make you crave more carbohydrate food. It makes sense from all those student nights that you raided McDonald's the following day. The lymphatic system of the brain is called the lymphatic system. So that the brain has its own lymphatic system. It's only been discovered reasonably recently, actually, and it basically cleans out toxins while you sleep. And one of the toxins that it cleans out is something called amyloid beta. Really high doses of amyloid beta have been associated with Alzheimer's disease. So there is some thought around people that don't sleep very well, whether that is associated with Alzheimer's disease. So there we go. It's quite important to look at. Causes of sleep disruption. I've talked a little bit about screens and lights. The light that your computer emits actually reduces your production of melatonin considerably. So I was just finding some research here that suggested that suppresses melatonin production up to 91%. So ideally, you should have your screens off about 90 minutes before you head off to bed. If at all possible, dim your screens and dim your lights at night. Mobile phones often have a dimming feature, which is specific. I have mine on that all the time, actually. It's a lower light feature. It blocks out some of the blue light that's emitted from the screen. So screens can really disrupt sleep. So if you're a person that likes to work on your computer till late at night and then wondering why you're not sleeping, that could be one of the reasons. Shift work, so chronic, obviously, nurses, doctors, but factory workers, for obvious reasons, you're going to be up all night. You generally do not sleep as well during the day, and shift workers do have research suggests they do have a really strong correlation between depression, unfortunately, and mental illness. Alcohol is wonderful to help you get off to sleep. However, once the alcohol is a depressant, so once the alcohol actually wears off, your chances are that your body will start to waken, and so you'll get this response at sort of 2 or 3 in the morning where you just wake up. So you've had the alcohol, it's helped you get off to sleep, the alcohol's worn off, and unfortunately your body tends to wake up again. So alcohol can definitely disrupt your sleep. Caffeine, coffee, obvious reasons. Stimulant. Exercising too late in the evening, so you don't really want to be exercising after about 8 o'clock at night. I think they say the ideal time is obviously up until I think 6 o'clock in the evening is an ideal time to be exercising. Nighttime noise, obviously it's going to keep you awake. Sleep apnea, so snoring, whether it's yours or your partner's. So if it's your partner's, obviously that's going to be disrupting you. If it's yours, actually there is a strong relationship between sleep apnea and depressive illness or other sort of mental health conditions. So poor quality sleep, once again. This little graph on the side here looks at melatonin production, which is in the red. So melatonin is that wonderful hormone that when you're awake, so this is daytime, when you're awake, it's quite low and it starts to rise as the evening progresses. Apparently, I think it peaks at about 9 o'clock at night. It goes, peaks at 9 o'clock at night. It goes higher through the night. It reduces in the morning. And this is your cortisol. So your cortisol is reasonably high when you're awake, obviously, during the day. We'll talk about cortisol a little bit more later. And it comes right down when you're asleep. And then your cortisol will peak again at about 6:30 in the morning. It's your wake-up hormone. So we think of cortisol as a stress hormone, but it's also your wake-up hormone as well. So you need reasonable amounts of hormone to get that get up and go out of bed. A spike in cortisol level will actually increase the glucose, amount of glucose in your blood as well. So if you because it is a stress response, it actually releases glucose to get you ready for fight or flight. At this time of the day, it's getting you ready to get up and start your day, which for some people might feel like the same thing. So lack of sleep and mental illness, a bit of the research, a bit more detail about that. Insomnia and other sleep problems increase the risk of developing depression. So this is a longitudinal study, quite a lot of people. This was reasonably old, so they did this in 1989, and they looked at how long people slept, how many hours they slept, and whether they reported a history of insomnia. And those who reported a history of insomnia were 4 times more likely to develop major depression by the time the second interview 3 years later. So this was looking at twins as well. So this was a study that actually found that the sleep problems developed well before the major depression did. Sleep problems preceded anxiety disorders only 27% of the time, while they preceded depression 69% of the time. Very short sleepers, so less than 6 hours of the day, are about 10% more likely to die of any cause than individuals sleeping around 7 to 9 hours. So that's kind of a little bit frightening. Lack of sleep is associated with poorer health outcomes, as I've said, and including diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease. Individuals with sleep apnea, as I said, increased risk for depression, psychopathology, including suicidal ideation, and melatonin also is involved in managing immune function, blood pressure, and cortisol levels. So hopefully you're getting to understand how important sleep is for not only your mental health, but your physical health as well. So these are some sleep tips. I know that for people that suffer from insomnia, it is incredibly difficult and incredibly frustrating. And I know some people that do absolutely everything they can and still struggle to sleep. Interestingly enough, I have spoken to quite a few professionals who say to me, I cannot sleep, but I just got such a sleeping problem, and I think it's the mattress, or it's the home, or it's bed, or something. And I said, well, what makes you think that? And they go, well, when I'm on holiday, I sleep fine. And I said, do you think it's got to do with your job? So, high-powered professionals, I think often people like real estate agents who are sort of on the go all the time, have their phone ready all the time, don't sleep very well at night. However, go on holiday, no problem whatsoever. So that's a lot about actually turning things down in the evening before you actually get into bed and having a real good wind down routine. So aiming to get at least 7 hours sleep, ideally bed by 10. Reading a book, preferably not on a Kobo or a Kindle, certainly not on your laptop. And so reading a book, it will for some people be enough to make them feel a bit sleepy. Sleep in a very dark room and is cool, reasonably cool. You don't want a room that's too hot. Exposing your body to bright light in the morning will stimulate that melatonin. So any way you can, open your curtains, expose your eyes as well to the bright light, and eliminate all lights during sleep. For some people, that's even the radio alarm, so that the radio clock alarm with those digital lights. Make sure you don't have lights on, Wi-Fi lights and things like that in your room. So for some people, if you're desperate, I would try taking all those out of your room, or at least turning them all off. Meditation and mindfulness, obviously, to help support the parasympathetic system, so that rest and digest system, relaxation exercises, breathing exercises. And there's some research that suggests that journaling, so writing down your thoughts in the evening, and especially a gratitude exercise, has actually been shown to improve sleep quality. So gratitude exercise is that wonderful sitting down, spending 15 minutes at the end of the day saying, this is what I'm thankful for. You can do it for only 5 minutes if you want. So, and it doesn't have to be very big things. We often start with, I'm grateful for my family and I'm grateful for my house, but it can be really small things as well. So grateful that it rained today. I know that sounds an odd one, but it rained and it watered my garden. I'm really grateful that I experienced the sun, or I got a longer lunch today. So excuse me. So it doesn't have to be huge. Avoiding caffeine and alcohol and high sugar. Excuse me, I'm just going to take a wee sip. Exercising during the day, not too late at night. Some supplementation that you can use. Magnesium, melatonin, 5-HTP. These are supplements that have been shown to be really useful. Melatonin, obviously. Unfortunately, you cannot get melatonin from a chemist. Sounds like I'm losing my voice. You can get that from your GP. So that is something that you can ask for if you have chronic insomnia. Some GPs will be quite fine with giving it to you. Magnesium is a really lovely relaxant. And chamomile tea, for some people, they find that enough. 5-HTP is actually a precursor to serotonin, which I discussed last week. So the 5-HTP can actually help you sleep as well. If you remember the diagram from last time, serotonin converts to melatonin. So if you're giving the 5-HTP, that's the precursor to the serotonin, it converts to the melatonin. Other things that you can do: practice nasal breathing, reduce your snoring. Sleep apnea is related to depression, which I've already talked about, and just things to consider: your job, what your relationships, what the impact that might be having as well. The next thing I want to talk about is exercise. So exercise has been shown in some studies to be as effective as an antidepressant. So last week we learned about how nutrition, how changing your diet and having this was a Mediterranean type diet in that one study, could reduce depression in 30% of people that change their diet. There are some studies that show that exercise can be as effective as an antidepressant and close to 30% remission. So that's actually quite amazing. So exercise releases endorphins, serotonin, dopamine. So once again, the serotonin and the dopamine are those wonderful neurotransmitters, and other hormones related to positive mood. It reduces hormones related to stress, such as cortisol and adrenaline. And the positive effects from exercise, and so that's the almost like the high that you might get from exercise, in some cases can last for up to 12 hours. Exercise promotes BDNF. So BDNF is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and it's basically helps to grow new hormones. New neurons, which of course is wonderful. That you want to be growing new neurons all the time. It helps to have a brain that's going to be performing really, really well, and once again reducing the likelihood of things like Alzheimer's occurring. Not exercising has been suggested to be as bad as smoking when it comes to morbidity and mortality. And I really want to enhance the fact that it's not so much about exercise. We're not expecting you to go to the gym every day. You don't need to go to the gym. It's about physical activity. So whether you work in the garden, whether you play tennis, whether you are doing a load of housework, it doesn't really matter. It's the movement, and it's the regular movement. It's the getting up out of your chair every hour. It's going for a brief walk. It's going for a walk around the block. All these things will actually be much more beneficial to you than sitting down all day and then just going to the gym twice a week. So it really is about natural physical activity and movement. Research says that as little as 2 hours a week, so don't get it right, it's not 2 hours a day, it's 2 hours a week, and at maximum 6, they say. Obviously, there are plenty of people that do a load more than 6. It's probably just what they studied, and too much exercise is not necessarily a good thing either. Obviously, too much exercise for some people, it can be another stressor. So for some people, you'll know if you've done too much because you feel tired for days afterwards. So a little bit of exercise is what we're looking at. One study suggested that 12% of depression cases could be prevented if everyone just got 1 hour of exercise a week. So it's not a very big ask. Some brief tips about exercising. Now, exercise for some people, if you're depressed, can be incredibly difficult, and there's nothing more that you don't want to do if you're struggling with depression. For some people with anxiety, it's too much of an effort to get out of the house and be in a public spot, or so it is something that you have to kind of introduce reasonably slowly. But the frequency is more important than the intensity. It's about moving regularly and incorporating it into your everyday life. As I said, you don't have to go to the gym. 15 minutes twice a day is sufficient to start. So start small. Doesn't have to be huge. I know that when I was working full-time and I used to come home and feel quite tired, and I used to think the last thing I felt like doing was going for a walk. I used to have my walking shoes by the front door, and sometimes I wouldn't even walk in the front door. I would just come straight home. I would take off my work shoes, I'd put on my walking shoes, and I would just turn around and walk straight back out the door, because I knew that once I came in and sat down, it wasn't going to happen. So just simple techniques like that can be really, really useful in just getting that motivation to get out. And the other thing I used to do is say, right, I can't be bothered doing a half an hour walk. I'm just going to walk to the corner of the street, which was, 5 minutes walk of that. And by the time you've done that, you're going like, oh, actually, it's not so bad. And you carry on walking. So it's just, you have to play a few tricks with yourself. Just start very slow. So if you're looking after someone that you think that exercise might be really useful, obviously don't expect them to jump up for joy. Start them really, really small. It doesn't have to be anything too big. Often people ask, what's the best exercise for me? Or, what am I going to get the most out of? And honestly, the answer always is whatever you enjoy the most. So if you love walking, then that's what you should do. If you love swimming, go swimming. If you love dancing, go dancing. So anything that you enjoy is going to be more important than, the almost more important than whether it's the right sort of exercise or not. If you've got a friend that you can bring into it, so if you've got a friend that you can organise and say, right, every Tuesday, Friday and Sunday we're going to go walking, that really keeps you in check. The other thing that you can do is get a goal. So for some people, they might decide to do a 6-kilometre walk or a half marathon, or for some people a full marathon, depending on where they're at. So having a goal can be really, really useful, gives you a bit more motivation. That's the most, yes. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about here is looking at stress. And so I've talked about that a little bit. Stress is a huge problem in our society, and it's not so much, I think in many cases, that our lives are so incredibly stressful, but we do perceive them to be incredibly stressful. Sometimes we put an awful lot on our plates, and a lot of stress is about how we interpret it and how we approach what's going on in our lives. So small amounts of stress can actually be really good for us and good for the body. So exercise, for example, is actually a stressor, but it's a stressor that actually gives you, positive benefits. Cold swimming is a stressor for the body, but once again, gives you benefits. Sauna is a stress on your body, heat stress, but it can also have a beneficial effect. So not all stresses are bad. So really important to remember that. As I said before, the highest cortisol release that you're going to have during the day is actually when you wake up. So it is the time that you're going to need to get up and go. I had a very interesting conversation with someone today who has got a blood glucose meter which she continuously wears, and she really wants to know what causes her blood sugar levels to rise. And so she was noting the foods she was eating and how they were rising her blood sugar levels or not, and what was the best sort of foods for her. Interestingly enough, she got a rather distressing email from a very unhappy person who was quite aggressive towards her. And she said her blood sugar levels shot up. So normal blood sugar levels are about 5 to 7, or can be 4.5 to 7, and her blood sugar levels shot up to over 7 from a stressful email. So it just goes to show the incredible power that the mind has. So the mechanism behind that is that the stressful event released cortisol into her bloodstream. The cortisol causes a dump of sugar, basically, so glucagon from the liver into the bloodstream to get ready for a flight or fight response. So that actually caused her blood sugar levels to rise. So quite amazing. That's the impact that stress can have on your body. So mental stress in the short term can be really motivating and encouraging. So sometimes a stressful event or a negative event actually causes you to take a look and go, you know what, is this what I really want to be doing? Do I need to change things? Is this working for me? So that's about changing your attitude towards the stressor. Chronic stress, however, whether it's physical or psychological, whether it's a real stressed or imagined, can cause long-term changes in the immune system and can cause inflammation. So stress can be caused by lack of sleep, as we've discussed. Lack of sleep contributes to a lot of things, but it can cause a chronic stress response in the body. Gut problems can contribute to a long-term physical stress. Poor diet, a major life stressor, obviously, and that can all contribute to inflammation. and an accident or an injury obviously can so all these things can actually cause inflammation in your system, and that is actually a chronic stressor on the body. Major life stressors, especially those involving interpersonal stresses and social rejection, so relationship breakups is probably the biggest one, are the strongest risk factor for depression. And stressful life events increase a person's risk, obviously, for major depression. So major depression is what would be diagnosed from a psychiatric point of view, a major depressive disorder. Part of how stress affects you is how you approach the situation, and what is very stressful for one person may simply be for another, a reason to change or a reason to do things differently. And those with religious, spiritual beliefs or a way of interpreting the negative events may have improved resiliency over those without. So there's a number of research studies that looks at religion and spiritual beliefs and coping in stressful situations, and the thought is that they can actually cope better. So if you've got some way of understanding or dealing with a stressor, whether it's you bring God into the equation, or whether you believe it's karma, or whatever your spiritual belief is, it can really help for you to deal with difficult situations, to bring in that belief system. So some tips for dealing with stress. There are many. These are some of the ones that I use quite regularly. One of my favourite ones, and ones I teach to clients all the time, is the STOP technique. So this is the one here. So it's basically the moment that you notice that you're feeling stressed is to stop, to take a moment, to observe your breath. So really just connect with your breath and do 2 or 3 breaths, and then proceed with mindfulness. Then carry on with what you're doing, but bring yourself into the present moment and carrying on what you're doing. So a lot of stress it comes from worrying about the past, ruminating over something that you really can't change, or worrying about the future. So a lot of the things that we talk about is applying mindfulness. Now, mindfulness we'll be talking about in our last session. So mindfulness is about being present in this very moment. And that can be something that can actually reduce that stressful thought, or those, your mind from being in that stressful state. Is actually bringing yourself into the present moment and asking yourself, what is stressful about this moment right now? And often there isn't, even if you're stuck in traffic and you're late for work, actually being in the car at that present moment, there's actually nothing that's threatening to you. There's nothing that's particularly stressful. So it's about reinterpreting your thoughts around that. This is one that I do for myself sometimes, is just stopping and asking myself, what do I need right now? If I'm feeling agitated or stressed or whatever it might be, I just think, what do I need? Do I need food? Do I need a break? Do I need to get up from the table? Do I need a cup of water? Do I need a cup of tea? Do I need to phone a friend? It can help just to stop and think, I need to change how things are. What can I do? And what do I need? Sometimes I need food. Sometimes I'm hungry. I realise I haven't eaten for 4 hours or whatever it might be. And actually, I just need to stop and eat something, and actually I'll feel much better. Breathe. So I'm going to talk about breathing very shortly, but breathing deeply with a real emphasis on diaphragmatic breathing, which I'll talk to you about, and through the nostrils is a very important way of dealing with stress. So once again, it comes back to that stop. I love that. So observe your breath. While you're observing your breath, you could actually just take some wonderful, relaxed belly breaths. And I will talk you through those in a moment. And this is about movement again, because sometimes moving, going for a walk, just walking around your desk, for example, is enough to just break that mindset. Sometimes a helpful question, sometimes not. Depends on the situation and what you're stressed about. Sometimes a helpful question is, what is the worst thing that can happen? Because sometimes we're stressing out and we're freaking out about something that may happen. And if you think about what the worst thing is, sometimes it's pretty bad. Other times it's actually, it's actually not that bad. It's not going to be the end of the world if the worst thing happens. So I'll let you decide whether that question's the right one to ask. Highly recommend avoiding alcohol and drugs. If you are a person that comes home every night and uses or uses alcohol and drugs as escaping from a difficult situation regularly, you'll never learn to deal with that. You'll never teach yourself the coping skills that you need to get on with life without turning to drugs and alcohol. So that's something I feel really strongly about. Sometimes you need to tolerate being uncomfortable. And I don't mean if you're severely depressed, severely anxious or suicidal, obviously, don't tolerate any of that. Go and get help. Don't turn to alcohol and drugs. So it's that, understanding that life sometimes is really challenging and there are going to be some difficult emotions sometimes, and not always trying to suppress them. Sometimes you just need to sit with them and know that they're really uncomfortable and know that they'll pass and know that they'll be okay, that things will be okay again. So that's, it's about that riding with the waves. So I think it was no, I'm not going to say where it's from originally, but they talk about riding with the waves. So, it's like being on the surfboard and actually riding the waves up and down and not actually being dragged in or feeling like you're being pummeled by them. And so just going with the flow, and it can be really challenging sometimes, but I highly recommend practicing that. So this is a little bit about breathing. So breathing well I forgot initially to put the well word in there, and I just put breathing is an essential part of health. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's not very sensible. So yes, breathing well is an essential part of health. And so breathing can invoke the parasympathetic nervous system. So this is the nervous system I talk about quite a lot. It's the rest and the digest, the relax. It supports the immune system function. It's this wonderful autonomic, so automatic nervous system. And the quickest way to override anxiety is sometimes just controlling your breath, because controlling your breath can send messages to your brain actually that things are okay. And right towards the end, actually, I'm going to bring in a little picture about the vagus nerve and how this interacts with that, because there are actually ways of messaging from your brain to many organs, but one of those includes the lungs. And so obviously in a stressful situation, the brain's going to send messages to your lungs to breathe faster, and obviously for your heart to beat faster. But actually, if you slow your breathing down, it will actually send a message to your brain that, oh, actually, no, I think things are okay. So the message goes both ways. There are some studies that suggest that so the breathing exercises significantly reduces long-term anxiety and can reduce depression. So there's a bit of research around there. So I used to have this stuck to my car, actually, remember to breathe. So it is actually something that's really important. You can do this 100 times a day. You can stop, roll your shoulders back, just focus on your breath, and just give yourself a few really lovely, deep, relaxed breaths. So this is a little bit about how to breathe. Really important to breathe through your nose rather than your mouth. Nose breathing is the more relaxed way to breathe. Breathing through your mouth is often what you'll do when you're under a stressful situation. So breathing through your nose is a way of actually, once again, telling your brain things are okay, we're relaxed. The other idea is that you should be moving your diaphragm. So I always call it belly breathing because that helps to understand it a little bit more. But when you breathe in, your belly should be moving out. So if you're thinking about taking a deep breath, I'm not sure how well you can see me, but if you can think about taking a deep breath, it's not your chest that should be rising. It should be your diaphragm that is coming in and out. So a deep breath would actually look like breathing in, your belly goes out. Breathing out, your belly comes in. Your shoulders should be able to remain low relatively low, and your chest should not be moving too much. And you actually want the breath to be really calm and relaxed. So you don't want to be, you don't want that sort of breathing. You just want it really calm and really relaxed, and just through your belly. So belly breath in and a belly breath out. And what can really help is doing a small pause in between the in and the out breath. And this slows the breathing down a little bit more, and it can stimulate the vagus nerve, which I'll talk about a little bit at the end. So this is a wonderful technique. Highly suggest that you practice it, and super easy to teach to people as well. I'm going to talk about a few of the other things that have been touted by the Mental Health Foundation of New Zealand. These are wonderful ways of, they call them the 5 ways to wellbeing. This was actually originally done by a company, I think in England, who wanted to do some research about what were the most important things to contribute to mental health and wellbeing. And these are the things that they came up with. So I'm going to go through these. Some of these I've already been through, but I'm going to go through these a little bit more. So connecting with people. So right at the beginning, we talked about loneliness being one of the biggest predictors of ill health. So socialization, so talking and listening, obviously communicating with people, smiling at strangers, connecting with people. Now this is very interesting, but there was a woman called Barbara Fredrickson who's done a lot of research about how to stimulate the vagal nerve tone, or the vagus nerve, which is related to invoking the parasympathetic, the rest and digest system. And they have discovered that even small micro moments, so when you smile at a stranger, when you engage or when you connect with somebody, that actually stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's incredibly powerful. And they've done lots of research around that. And they talk about it as micro moments of, I think there's even about love. It's actually, they talk about it in a way of actually stimulating a real sense of peace and calmness within yourself. So quite amazing. Connecting with a pet can have a similar response. So if you don't have any humans around but you have a pet, connecting with a pet can be equally as important. We've talked about being active, moving your body, whatever you enjoy. It's definitely one of the 5 ways of well-being. Keep learning, so trying new experiences and being curious, so taking up a night class, going to dance lessons, involving yourself and actually having something to participate in can be really very useful as part of mental health and well-being. They've done loads of research about giving, and this can be in any way, shape or form. So giving of your time, giving of, if you want to bake a cake for somebody, it can also be just being a listening ear for someone. So giving invokes feelings of well-being and positivity. Obviously it enhances connection, promotes happiness and well-being. Can be something as small as a smile or a compliment or donating time. So there's a lot of research around that. Taking notice is about mindfulness and connecting with your 5 senses. You take a moment, notice what you hear, see, smell, and noticing the small things in life. So noticing the dew on the grass, or noticing the daisy in the lawn, noticing the way the rain has made your plants shine, often it's the small things, that being mindful, that can actually also invoke a sense of well-being. So these are some other sort of practices that have been shown to have a positive impact on mood, and I love some of these and I use them quite regularly with clients. One of them is a half smile. So this is a very odd thing, but they've done a study where they had people put a pencil in their mouth this way, which actually forced a small smile in their mouth. I think the other people had to hold their mouth in a funny O shape or something similar. And they did a before and after of their mood score. And those who had to have the forced smile actually had improved mood. And I remember talking to a friend about this, and she said, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to use that." And she said that she reported back to me about a month later that she's used it in stressful situations. Obviously, you don't want to have a grimace on your face. You don't want to annoy people by having a ridiculous smirk on your face. But she said that when she noticed she was getting stressed and frowning, she stopped and she put a half smile on her face. And she said her mood instantly changed. So it was actually a really easy way. Once again, this speaks to your brain. This says, oh, actually things aren't so bad. So the frown obviously is going to tell your brain that things are very stressful. The half smile is actually going to give some different information to your brain. Gratitude list, there's loads of research around gratitude and its importance for mental health and well-being. They've done studies where I think people have done, there we go, participants who kept a gratitude journal weekly for 10 weeks or daily for 2 weeks experience more gratitude, positive mood, optimism, and about the future, and better sleep. So it's a wonderful, easy thing to do. I've also, so that's the plain gratitude I am thankful for is a wonderful way of doing it. There's also something called gratitude with a twist. And this is when things don't go quite as well as you planned, but you can still find a positive swing on things. So for example, you might have been driving home and your car broke down on the motorway, and you've had it was raining and it was a pretty crappy day. So at the end of the day, you might be thinking, wow, can't really think of anything nice about that. But actually, yes, your car broke down. Yes, it was raining, but a stranger stopped to help you out. So you can find the positive within the negative. In this case, I'm so thankful that the stranger stopped to help me out, even though my car had broken down. If you've missed the bus, for example, you might go, well, I've missed the bus, but I've got a shelter which is keeping me warm and dry while I'm waiting for the bus. So it's a nice other way of looking at the positive in a negative situation. Best possible self-exercise. One of my very favourites. It's one I get clients to do often, and I've had wonderful feedback about this. I've had one person message me almost like a year later, I think maybe even longer. So the idea about the best possible self is that you imagine yourself at some stage in the future when you're living your best life, and you are actually your best self. So everything that you've worked hard to achieve has come to fruition. And you write about what that life is like. You write about who you're living with, your job, what you're doing, everything that's important about who you want to be in the future. And it invokes a real sense of positivity. And it also conditions your brain to seek out things which are in alignment with that goal. And as I said, I had someone contact me a year or so down the track after doing this exercise. And so she's found her best possible self that she'd done a year or two earlier. And she realised that everything that she thought about had come to fruition. And she said it was incredibly powerful for her to actually think, wow, she was not in a particularly good space when she did the exercise, but a year or two later she had managed to actually see that it was possible, that she'd achieved some wonderful things. So I'm happy to share that exercise. It's on the internet. I can share that with you if you want a link to that. And practicing mindfulness, obviously, so we're talking about that towards on the last week. So we'll get into that a little bit more. Other activities, so when I was researching all this, yoga improved depression symptoms, reduced suicidal ideation, reduces anxiety. Laughter, so they actually done a meta-analysis, so a major study looking at all the other studies on laughter and humour interventions, and they are effective in relieving depression, anxiety, and improved sleep quality in adults. So great thing to do. I know that at times when I felt a little bit down in the dumps, and my daughter and I both do this, we go on to Damn-You Autocorrect, and you can have a very good laugh for 15-20 minutes and you will feel an awful lot better. So whatever tickles your fancy, if you comedy, whatever, it can really support mood and well-being. And dance and music, as I mentioned earlier, there's been a few studies about that it can reduce the amount of depressive symptoms and stress levels. it's the small things. This is what I mentioned earlier. This is one of my very favourite cartoons. So Michael Leunig, he does amazing work. And I certainly know that there are days like this, that you might think, oh, it's a big week, or, lots going on, and all these things are happening. And then if you stop and just notice, or you just stop and listen to the bird chirping in the tree, for example. So I love this cartoon. It's one of my very favourites. I share it often. But I think that this is just, it hits the nail on the head about noticing the small things and being grateful, actually. This is based on a load of work by a woman who's written a book on happiness, and her name is Sonja Lyubomirsky. And I'm just throwing this in here. It's a little bit difficult to get your head around, but I really love it. They've done some research that suggests that when it comes to happiness, there's a bit of a formula in it. And 50% of your happiness levels is what is really like your set point. It's about your personality, who you are, just your general attitude and positivity. But it's who you are, it's set, and it can't really be changed. So we know that that's just a set point of about 50%. 10% of your happiness is about your circumstances in life. So this is about your job, who you may not be married to, what sort of car you drive, or whatever else you might think is important to your happiness. So it's a very small amount. It's 10%. The rest, so up to 40%, is about your behaviours and your attitude to life. It's about intentional activity. So I really like this, because this suggests that you have a 40% margin to increase your happiness levels by participating in behaviours, all of which we've talked about this evening, which, intentional activity, which can change your happiness levels. So I think that's really powerful, and it can be a little bit motivating to see that actually, yes, we can change our happiness levels by bringing in some of these wonderful tools. And as I said before, this is the wonderful vagus nerve. So up here is actually the brain. I don't know why they cut the brain off, but the brain's up the top here. And I'm going to test you on, or no, I'm not. But these are this is the vagus nerve, this wonderful yellow thing. And you can see everywhere that it goes. So all these organs, the vagus nerve is attached to. And it allows this wonderful connection between our brain and all these organs. So it's a pretty amazing nerve, an amazing activity that happens in our bodies without us being able to do much about. However, there are some things that we can do to really stimulate the vagus nerve. So as I said before, it interfaces with the parasympathetic control of the heart, lungs, and digestive tract. So it has that function of being able to slow things down or speed things up, or whatever is necessary to be in that calm, wonderful state, the nurturing, healing state, really. And there are some activities such as holding the breath for a few seconds, dipping your face in cold water. Cold showers probably do the same thing. Coughing, strangely enough. Humming and singing are another two that I've heard about that stimulate the vagus nerve. Or tensing the stomach muscles as if you're going to have a bowel movement. So these, believe it or not, stimulate your vagus nerve. Best and digest. It's pretty amazing. And if you're told an inspiring story, your vagus nerve fires. If you have feelings of compassion, your vagal nerve fires. And so the more you feel compassion, the stronger your vagal nerve response. So very, very interesting. So even though it's an automatic thing, there are some things that you can do to really support the vagal nerve stimulation, which will support the parasympathetic nervous system, which will help with calming and reducing anxiety. So there are many things that you can do which contribute to a positive mood, and your day-to-day habits will definitely add up to a lifetime. And I think, this is just very briefly putting it all into practice. So these are some of the main things that I've talked about that you can incorporate into your everyday living. So moving any way that you prefer. Move often, move outside, small steps, put your walking shoes on, etc., etc. Sleep, screens off at 8 o'clock at night. Sorry, I'm keeping you above that anyway. Regular routine, bed by 10 o'clock, relaxation exercises, writing down your thoughts before you go to sleep, or having a gratitude journal. Aim for 6 to 8 hours, ideally 7 to 8, and no more than 10. Oversleeping is also not good for you. Breathing and mindfulness, practice a relaxational breathing, mindfulness technique every day. And once again, you can do it formally, which I'll talk about in a couple of weeks. You can do a formal breathing technique, but actually any time of the day, you can have a mini moment of mindfulness, and you can just stop, roll your shoulders back, bring your mind to your breathing. So pay attention to your breath and your breathing. Keep your mouth closed, relax your shoulders, and do some lovely relaxed abdominal breaths, belly breathing. And I haven't talked much about counselling and therapy, but it's certainly something that I would encourage anybody and everybody to do and to get engaged with. Sometimes our depression or anxiety, we're stuck on the same old thoughts, we're stuck on the same old habits, and we're unable to lift ourselves out of that. And this is where it's incredibly useful to have a person that can work with us, that can peel off the onion layers, can see, what the core issues are, and can actually really support us to change our thinking and change our habitual patterns, which are causing us to really continue maybe on a bit of a negative spiral. So there's a few acronyms down there. So CBT is cognitive behavioural therapy, lots of evidence around that for depression and anxiety. ACT is acceptance and commitment therapy. Wonderful therapy. I really love it. It uses, actually CBT uses a little bit of mindfulness as well. ACT uses quite a bit of mindfulness, but also accepting that things are as they are. SFT is solution-focused therapy. It's about actually finding solutions and focusing on working with those. It's not about delving into the past. In fact, none of these are particularly about delving into the past and unraveling everything. That's more about psychotherapy. There are loads of different other sorts of therapies out there. These are just the ones that I know a little bit about, and I know that there's a little bit of research done about them. So highly recommend, if you yourself are having issues, or for someone, encourage them to get into some counselling. For some people, you only need 2 or 3 sessions just to put you back on the right track, just to kind of I just needed some tools or some techniques or some ways of stopping this negative downward spiral. And sometimes it can be actually quite simple. So I highly recommend that you look into that as well. And that is the end. So thank you very much for joining. I will take a look, and if you've got any questions or anything, you can actually unmute yourself and ask questions. Or if there's any chats, which there isn't. So I will upload this, hopefully again, to YouTube.